Hey now, we are getting over, and I am the Silver King, Adam Silverstein, here to lead you through these hard times. With your 2023 AEW Revolution Instant Analysis. That's right, Getting Over is here just minutes after AEW Revolution went off the air to break down every single bit from AEW's first pay-per-view of 2023. We're going to be breaking down the matches, giving you our commentary and reaction to those matches. We'll drop some grades and some ratings, and we will break down everything that we expect to happen with AEW into the near future. Vintage Chris Vanini is here to take the ride with me. He will be along momentarily as we kick off the show. I got to do what I always do here on Getting Over and remind you that this podcast
is all about Defy.
So be sure to head on over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify, drop those 5-star ratings, take a little extra time, leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, a written review, that is. Let everyone know how much you love the show. Tell them why you listen and subscribe, and perhaps mention our ultimate previews and instant analysis, which we do after every pay-per-view and premium live event. Also, do not forget to follow us on Twitter at Getting Overcast for episode drops, news, analysis, highlights, and much more, including live pre-shows before pay-per-views and polls where you can give us your pre- and post-show grades, which you guys all did for AEW Revolution. We will discuss that at the end of the show. Now, before I welcome Chris in, we do have one more tradition here on the Instant Analysis podcast, only because it's usually late. We're usually a little tired. We want to perk ourselves up by cracking open a cold one. And the Silver King is rocking with Evening Glow from Swamp Head Brewing in Gainesville, Florida tonight. Very excited. Not one of my favorite beers, but definitely a damn good one. Chris, welcome to the show. What do you got over there?
I've got a passion fruit cider from Austin East Ciders in Austin, Texas. Found it in my fridge. I think my wife got it, but it's pretty good, I got to say.
So are you a cider seltzer guy over beer, or is that just happens the way it's been?
My wife is, and she tends to just get more stuff to drink than I do, so a lot of it is just what she ends up having. But I'm not a big beer connoisseur, so to speak, so I have no problem jumping into the ciders and the spritzers and whatnot.
No, that makes sense. I kind of forced you into the situation by just bringing it up one time early in the history of this show. Hey, I'm going to pop a cold one if you want to join me. And then all of a sudden it became a quick tradition, but I never actually asked you that question. So here we are 3 years and hundreds of episodes later, and I'm just finding that out right now. Now we have a ton to break down from AEW Revolution. I should note before we get to that, if the Silver King sounds a little different, the final piece of equipment that I had been waiting for came in. So this should be the final sound that we get here on Getting Over. I hope you all enjoy it. We'll talk more about that on Tuesday. But Chris, it is time for us to break down AEW Revolution. We're going to talk about every single match on the card. We're going to tell you what happened, our reaction to it, some grades and ratings. We're going to go through the card from the main event is obviously where we kick off, but pretty much we'll go in order of importance, not in order of what we got on Revolution. And then at the very end, we will give you our pre-show expectation grades. We'll remind you what those were, and we will drop our post-show final grades as well. So Chris, you ready to get into it?
I am, man. I thought this was a great show. I'm looking forward to doing this episode.
I thought it was a great show as well. Let's talk AEW Revolution, and let's begin with the AEW World Championship match, MJF defending against Bryan Danielson in a 60-minute Iron Man match. Now, MJF got a special entrance with an orchestra all wearing Black Devil masks, playing his theme briefly before his music hit, and he entered in the White Devil mask that we saw, obviously, multiple months ago. The best part of the entrance, I thought, was actually his robe, which was sick as hell. Really quick, because we have a ton to talk about. I thought this was going to be some epic entrance when it started, but am I wrong that it was just kind of, to quote MJF, mid?
Yeah, AEW doesn't... They don't do the live production entrances really as well as WWE, so sometimes they just kind of end abruptly. I was hoping for a bit more. On the other hand, MJF's theme song is elite, so I was fine with just getting into it.
And it didn't play as well to like an orchestral setting as like Shinsuke Nakamura's theme did to the violin. Right. You know, it's tough to do it when the theme doesn't fit the same way. But alas, let's get to the match itself. So MJF jumped into the crowd after 5 minutes. He took a drink from a mom and threw it on her kid. Now, one would think that was a plant. Apparently, it was not. We'll find out a little bit more on that as the week goes, but big yikes if that was not the case. He then said into the camera, quote, "Oh no, is this going to cost me a star, Dave? I guess I won't get the Bryan Danielson Award, which is the Best Wrestler of the Year award from that newsletter." MJF later taunted the crowd more. Danielson hit a sunset flip powerbomb and hurricanrana out of the corner. MJF caught him running for a knee bomb, also hitting a super kick before doing the Shawn Michaels pose. MJF missed a springboard hurricanrana outside and sold the knee. Then he hit Bryan with a pump handle bomb, basically the JML driver that Swerve does, with Danielson almost landing on his neck to the point that Taz audibly winced and talked about how scared he was of the move on commentary. They did a pinfall counter sequence that probably went like 25 attempts, and finally Bryan hit a psycho knee after a lariat to lead 1-0 after 25 minutes. MJF quickly low blowed Danielson in front of the referee for a DQ. Then he got consecutive pinfalls on him because he low blowed the guy. That knotted the match 2-2 a minute later. I believe I had that, by the way. Bryan battered MJF outside, slammed his injured knee into the post, and locked in a figure four. MJF put Bryan on the timekeeper's table and hit a huge flying elbow drop onto Danielson outside, but Bryan beat the count at 9.9. MJF then did a tombstone pile driver through the rest of the table and sold his knee again, so there was really no count. Danielson bladed and ate a blood capsule simultaneously. MJF, when he was coming back in, hit Heatseeker and got the fall to lead 3-2 with 19 minutes and 30 seconds left. He ripped at the blade job on Bryan's head and screamed, "You're the best in the world. You fucking suck." And then he ranted on Bryan's kids. Danielson landed some shots outside, including a hammer from the top rope, and hit a spider superplex hanging on the top rope, plus a diving headbutt. That somehow led to a huge gash on MJF's head and a crimson mask, even though Bryan's head hit his shoulder. Bryan ran around MJF for a psycho knee and then forced MJF to tap, tying the match 3-3 with 10 minutes and 40 seconds left. They did Salt of the Earth, LaBelle Lock, back to Salt of the Earth counters. Then they traded blows with Bryan laughing and MJF kind of crying as 5 minutes remained. MJF hit Heatseeker for a near fall. Danielson caught him with hammer elbows on the top rope, but MJF pulled him into an avalanche tombstone pile driver off the second rope. He was unable to capitalize because he was once again selling the knee. There were 2 minutes and 30 seconds left. Bryan countered a cover into a single leg crab on the knee. MJF nearly tapped, but kept making a fist and kind of biting it. Danielson grabbed the arm that he was going to tap with, and then time ran out with MJF tapping about 2 or 3 seconds after the bell. The match immediately was ruled a draw. Fans chanted bullshit. Tony Schiavone got a message on his headset. He tried to sell like he didn't know what was going on. Danielson got to his feet as trainers gave MJF oxygen in the ring. Schiavone communicated to Justin Roberts, who announced that Tony Khan would not let this match end in a draw, so it was going to sudden death. MJF pushed the referee, who pushed him back for a near fall roll-up. MJF then mule kicked Danielson for another near fall roll-up. MJF grabbed the title, only to get told it would be a DQ if he used it. So he handed it over to the referee. This was all a plan. And he grabbed the Dynamite Diamond ring, tried to punch Danielson, but missed it. He ate a Poison Rana plus a Psycho knee for a 2.9 false finish. Bryan went after the knee in a crab again, and the referee pulled the ring off MJF's hand. And everyone's thinking here, this is going to be the end of the match. He grabbed the bottom rope with his middle finger and then tapped. That made Bryan think he won, so he released the hold. But MJF slid outside, and he grabbed the oxygen tank with his ass sitting at ringside and his back against the ring. When Danielson peeked over the apron to presumably grab him by the head and bring him back inside, MJF nailed Bryan in the head with the tank. Apparently, the referee didn't see it. Then he, back in the ring, put Bryan in his own LaBelle Lock for a 2-count arm drop. MJF did not release the LaBelle Lock, though, and that stifled Bryan's second wind. He actually tried to get his arm up to do the yes chant, which he's never really done before in AEW. But MJF stifled it, kept the LaBelle Lock in, and earned the tap-out victory to retain the title 4-3 in sudden death overtime. Oof. And Chris, I kind of need to take a breath after that. I think I actually need a cigarette after that, okay? Straight up, this was an incredible Iron Man match. We got a bit of Kurt Angle, Brock Lesnar with the purposeful DQs, a bit of Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart with the sudden death, but the match was completely its own from a uniqueness standpoint. Both guys came out looking incredible. Bryan for his wrestling and his guts, MJF for his intelligence and strategy, but also his guts as well. There were multiple spots in that match where a regular chicken shit heel would have just tapped, but MJF held his own and showed a ton of fortitude. So even if he's not going to beat you straight up as a wrestler, he's also not going to give up easily. It made him a much more believable champion, despite the fact that 3 of his 4 falls came via straight cheating in the match. Now, if Danielson was going to lose an Iron Man match, this was the most believable way to do that. It's the cheating aspect and the contrived sudden death finish that makes me wonder whether I can give it the full 5 stars. Historically, I reserve that rating for clean, hard-fought matches that are just exemplary wrestling and storytelling from bell to bell, because I usually never go above my 5-star rating. I also didn't find myself experiencing many emotions in the match. Like, I didn't get taken on a roller coaster of feelings for some reason. Now, that may have been because I was slightly distracted. My dog was sick, but it just didn't completely hit for me in that emotional way. So it's an A+, this match, without a doubt. Whether it's 4.75 stars or 5 stars, I just don't know. I'm going to have to rewatch the final 20 minutes, and maybe I'll be there by Thursday show, I mean. But either way, it was a top-tier match, an A+, and it exceeded my expectations, which were already high for the match going into it.
The best thing you can say about a 60-minute Iron Man match is that you're never really thinking, "Oh my God, there's so much time left in this." And
never thought that. Yeah.
After maybe the first 10 or 15 minutes or so, but after that, it never felt like it slowed down. It always felt like there was something going on, and it kept the intensity up. And this was such a different kind of Iron Man match than we typically get either in WWE or on the indies, where it's like, all right, we know these guys are 2 amazing wrestlers. Let's still do amazing wrestling stuff for 60 minutes. No, the story here was that MJF can't go 60 minutes or won't have the lung capacity to go 60 minutes by the end. And he clearly proved that he did. They told a story throughout this match. And the story that they told for the whole feud was in this match. And that's why it stayed compelling the entire time. I don't know about 5 stars either, because I think I'm extra picky about that. I'm probably in the 4.75 range, but
I think that's
I got a lot of other notes on here about this match, but I just thought this exceeded, I think, the expectations. I knew MJF was going to make it because he's really, really good at what he does, but he just, he blew everybody away. And that's how you keep a guy a heel while also gaining the respect of the crowd, which is kind of the same spot Roman Reigns has gotten to as well.
Mm.
So a couple other random notes I have here. MJF's moonsault off the middle rope. Horrible camera angle. They did the typical WWE, you do it from below, so you miss the height that the guy gets and the impressiveness of it. However, they did it a lot better when he did the elbow off the turnbuckle through the table.
That was the best shot from a camera standpoint of the entire show.
Yes, they definitely got that. Excalibur was so good in this match in explaining the strategy. Normally, there's not a reason to get into strategy, but in a match like this, you have to. So when MJF gets his 3rd pin, you're thinking, hey, why doesn't he immediately go for another pin again, just like he did before with the low blow? But he had the knee issue, and Excalibur was explaining, the knee issue that MJF's dealing with. It's distracting him and yada, yada, all this stuff. So that was nice. Excalibur explained why Bryan Danielson did the spider suplex, saying he didn't want to take the hit himself by doing a superplex. So he kept his legs tied up. I thought he did a tremendous job of explaining why the things happened. The blood in this match, we will get to blood later on in this show, but this is how you use blood in an impactful way, because it comes later in the match and it tells the story of the match. Yes, the MJF probably bladed a bit too hard on a headbutt that didn't even hit him in the head, but I can buy into the story that they're trying to tell, even if that's
Brian somehow bladed on his head and ate a blood capsule simultaneously from taking a shot into the table.
Yes. Executed, not the best, but
appropriate.
I appreciated the effort and the purpose behind it in the story that they were telling in the match. So that was okay. And then lastly, I know AEW has done this before, but the 3 arm drops before you declare a guy knocked out, I'm so glad they did that. I've been criticizing that WWE doesn't do this forever. It's a natural storytelling trope you can use in pro wrestling, and WWE's gone to the UFC thing where the ref just says it's over. There's no drama to it. So I love that they did the 3 arm drops, and then it ended up not mattering anyway. So just a couple other things I added onto it, wrote in my notes. Tremendous match.
Well, what's interesting about the 3 arm drop, because I love that too, and I think in any knockout scenario, you should have to do a 3 arm drop. That's my opinion. But am I wrong? Maybe he actually tapped, but I think in the Samoa Joe Wardlow match on the same show, they just declared that he was knocked out and ended the match. It was very inconsistent, and I think WWE occasionally does the arm drops as well. It's very rare in WWE. But when they do, it's completely inconsistent with the way that they referee or officiate is really the right word. Other scenarios where there's a potential knockout. So I like that they did it. It made for great drama in the match and it was appropriate. But I think the lesson, or what you and I are trying to communicate, is it should always be like that every single time.
Yes, completely. I'm trying to remember. I don't remember if Joe tapped or if the ref just declared it. But yes, it needs to be consistent.
Well, I'm sure I have the notes, so when we get to that match, I'll correct myself or one way or the other. But you're right. This was a damn good match. It was a fantastic main event. It was one of my favorite AEW matches, but also one of my favorite AEW main event matches on a pay-per-view ever. That doesn't mean it was quote unquote the best, but in terms of what I like as a professional wrestling fan, we got high quality wrestling, great storytelling in this match, and completely sensible falls and finishes. There were a couple occasions where you could say, well, why didn't they do this? Or since he did this, why didn't he do that? And you said that Excalibur explained a couple occasions. One of them was Brian had the submission locked in, but he released it after he got the tap. And he did that because his shoulder was hurting by putting MJF into that submission move. I think it was when he was doing either the label lock I think it was the single leg crab. Then he brought MJF's arm back at the end. So it made sense most of the times where you would say otherwise that there would be an inconsistency, but really the booking of the match was just so thoroughly sensible.
Exactly. Look at that.
And we don't get that a lot of times in AEW. Like we criticize that shit all the time.
I'm going to say this about basically the entire card. This was this match and this card was not overbooked. And that is so frequently the case on AEW.
It was not overbooked. That is fair. Yes. That is true.
So that is a positive.
So coming out of this, because we do need to move on, we have a lot more to talk about here. In terms of what's next for these guys going forward, we always try to hit that. It seems to me like MJF has Hangman Page in the near term and Adam Cole in the long term coming after him. Now, I'm thinking maybe Page at the next pay-per-view, maybe Adam Cole after that. I presume Brian is going to take an extended break that could be as little as 3 to 4 weeks. It could be a month and a half. I'm not exactly sure what they're going to do, but this did give me hope because, and to a degree, Chris, I think I said on the Ultimate Preview, I said it again on the pre-show, that what AEW should do is strap up Bryan Danielson, but what they will do is have MJF retain the title. And obviously I was right, I should say, about MJF retaining the title. But in retrospect, maybe my take on that they should have strapped up Danielson was a little rash because this did more to make MJF, in my opinion, than the Jon Moxley match did. I mean, this felt like a situation where you can now believe this guy as a champion. He's going to hark on the devil stuff and he's going to say, I'm a piece of shit. I'm the worst person in the world. And that's going to be monotonous, and he might do the bidding war of 2024, and that's going to be monotonous and all that. But in terms of caring about him as champion and believing that he is capable of beating anyone he goes up against without pure cheating, again, there was 3 of his 4 falls here were cheating, but the first 2 were really smart, and the last one was kind of smart too, but the first 2 were purposeful within the storyline of the match. So I come out of this in kayfabe looking at MJF as a more believable champion, a stronger champion. And not only am I glad that they kept the title on him because I predicted it, I'm glad that they kept the title on him because it was the right move.
In the big picture, you can see and understand why Bryan Danielson as your champion, next week on Dynamite, here he is.
Yeah.
It's a new
Papa rating. Yeah.
That's still a good thing to have. But and I said this too, even though I picked Bryan Danielson before on our Twitter Spaces pre-show, there is a litany of faces for him to line up against now. If Danielson won, it's not clear who's even up, so it did make complete sense for MJF to win. You've got, like you said, Adam Cole, Hangman Page, Ricky Starks, could go back to that, as a short-term thing. Like, there are a lot of options here. Now, Adam Cole, I know, is not coming back till the end of March, so MJF's got something to do for a month, maybe. But yeah, makes a lot of sense. This is one of your pillars of the company, and it was a trend on this show that AEW homegrown guys, almost exclusively, except for one match, went over former AEW or former WWE talent.
Yeah, more importantly, they went over in situations where it was a pillar versus like a quote unquote legend or someone who is up there in years in particular. Those people went over, and we'll talk about that more later. It's really two of the matches that we're going to talk about much later in the show. But you make a good point. AEW really focused on their talent on this show and made all the difference in the world in terms of my enjoyment of the product. So that was a huge positive. Chris, let's move to what was basically the co-main event. It was the mid-show main event. Hangman Adam Page against Jon Moxley in a Texas death match. Now, they put this in the middle of the show because they wanted to give a breather before the Iron Man match. But even more than that, given the fact that there was blood in the Iron Man match, it also gave your eyes a little bit of a rest from the crimson masks on the screen. And this was basically last man standing rules plus submissions somehow. And we'll get to that in a moment. Now, Hangman, I kind of poo-pooed MJF's entrance. Hangman, I thought, had an insanely cool entrance. He came out to Riders in the Sky. He was wearing all black and there were red graphics everywhere. I thought it was a top 5 AEW entrance to date. And I'm wondering if you agree with me on that, given you agreed with me about MJF earlier.
Yes. Very good alternate entrance for Hangman. I don't know if it's a permanent music change or not, but I did enjoy it. It did make it feel like a bigger deal. Also, by the way, I looked this up during the match. The rules of a Texas Death Match are you are pinned and then there's a 10 count. So
that's the rules of most Texas Death matches.
Yes, that's a typical Texas Death Match rule. But
they did give the now. Admittedly, I went to use the can, during the entrances of this match or right before the entrances, because AEW doesn't give you any time to breathe.
They did not.
It's match bell. Maybe there's a post match shit, but as soon as that ends, you get like a 30-second video package, and then the next match starts.
Yes.
So I ran to the bathroom. I know for a fact they announced the rules. I did not hear what they were. I presume it was knockout or submission.
I missed it too, because I was looking up halfway through the match what the rules were.
So I'm assuming that's what they said because of what we got in the finish. But yes, what you said, pinfall, 10 count, historically, that is what a Texas death match is from a finish perspective. Anyway, let's get to this match itself. So Hangman used barbed wire on Mox's head early, and that didn't cut him. So Mox still bladed in the corner about 3 minutes into the match. Then he caught Page in a triangle and literally stabbed him in the forehead with a fork as blood splattered all over the place. Page took 3 different shots with a barbed wire chair, and both guys were fully bleeding. 5 minutes into the match, maybe less. I really do wish I timed it. Next time I will. Hangman powerbombed Mox into what was supposed to be 2 chairs set up with barbed wire. He mostly missed them. Then he wrapped barbed wire around his chest before doing a moonsault outside, but Mox caught him with an RKO back inside. Mox put Page's hand between 2 bricks and squashed it before pile driving him into a chain. Hangman hit rolling forearms with barbed wire, then threw Mox into that same chair twice with a fallaway slam and deadeye. Then Page did a tope shoulder tackle, pushing Mox backward into a barbed wire board. Mox then tripped Hangman off the top rope into another barbed wire board outside. He landed headfirst, but it was elevated, so it actually absorbed the blow and lucked out in that way. Mox countered Buckshot Lariat into Death Rider, then stomped Page's head into the bricks, but Page stood at 9, so Mox choked him for another rise at 9, then mule kicked him low and wrapped a chain around his own neck. And by the way, that was one of, 8 mule kicks on this show. Hangman hit Mox with a brick. Mox gave him double birds as Hangman hit the Buckshot Lariat, then choked him over the top rope with the chain that Mox threw around his own neck as Mox tapped out for his first ever submission loss in AEW. So let me get the criticisms out of the way first. The fork stabbing was disgusting, and it felt almost purposeful just so they could get red early in the match. A Texas death match is an appropriate place for blood, but given how frequently, consistently, and the level to which the blood comes out of Jon Moxley's head, it had no effect on the match, which is an exact counter to what we got in the Iron Man match, where yes, MJF and Bryan Danielson have both bladed before, but they do it so inconsistently, and they did it so late in the match that it actually mattered during a 60-minute match where you need, things to change the pace and give you a different visual. Now, here, there was a massive overuse of barbed wire. I'd have liked to have seen a greater variety of weapons. The bricks were a nice touch. Now, on to the positives. There were multiple big-time spots where each guy had nice stretches of offense, and the finishing sequence was extremely strong, with Mox actually submitting for the first time while being hung, which is appropriate given Page's name, Hangman.
Yes.
Plus, Hangman came away as the appropriate and necessary winner, and this went a long way to rebuilding him after that not-so-great title run and a lot of time off. All in all, extremely strong. It was an A match. I'm saying 4.5 stars. I believe I'm going to keep it there despite the blood and the fact that it didn't really add to the match. It also didn't necessarily detract from the match. So that's where I sit. But whether it's 4.5, 4.25, it was an A.
The first half of this was a disgusting mess, and I hesitate to even call it wrestling.
That's fair.
But the second half of it really turned it on. And you can get past some of the disgusting stuff at the beginning because of how they finished, where it became about moves. It became about using weapons in a wrestling type of way and not just stabbing someone with a fucking fork and some of that other stuff. It was really distracting early on. Yes, we said on the Twitter Spaces, I set the over-under of 5 minutes on Moxley bleeding. You said the under. You won.
Easily.
You also asked me over-under on both of them bleeding. I said 10 minutes under. I got that one. So the unders hit on both of them in terms of the
well, I said easily. I think I said 5, and I was even more right on that. But
yeah. So that wasn't a surprise. And ultimately, like it was a mess at the beginning, but the second half of the match I really, really liked, and both guys just looked like just strong, good, top level wrestlers. And ultimately, you know what Hangman winning that way, you know what it reminded me of, and I'm sure it reminded you of this: Princess Leia and Jabba the Hutt in Return of the Jedi. Right?
Market zero!
You haven't seen Return of the Jedi?
I have never seen Star Wars. You know this.
You've never,
man.
But that was the movie that came out like 1983. Like so? That's oh man. I by the way, spoiler for Tuesday's WWE show, I have another Star Wars reference coming in my notes, so we'll get to that. Yeah, it was. Look, go watch, pull up YouTube, pull up Princess Leia choking out Jabba the Hutt. Looked like the exact same thing, tongue coming out, straining to choke him. I couldn't help but think of that. I thought it was great finish, really intense finish. Like if you're going to do a Texas death match, like that's a good way to do a finish, and to have Jon Moxley tap out. That is how you make someone, an elite level guy again. It wasn't stabbing Hangman in the face with a fork that made you feel like, oh, this guy's back. It's tapping out Jon Moxley by choking him with a chain that makes you feel like the old Hangman is back. By the way, by the end, Hangman wasn't even bleeding by the end of the match.
Yeah, no, that was good. Yeah,
that's why you don't bleed so early in the match. Because then by the end, when you're in the final climactic moment, you don't have the blood that you want to tell the story.
He didn't go deep enough because he's trying to protect the moneymaker. There's a difference when it comes to blading between guys who try to sell with their faces and guys who don't. Okay, and guys like Mox can have the scars all over their faces, and guys like Danielson can do that as well. And there's guys like MJF who bladed massively tonight. He was gushing blood out of his head, but it was a small little cut. And Hangman is not about to slice his head open. Let me tell you that right now. So
no, but he was bleeding a lot earlier.
He was, but he didn't go deep.
I'm saying so much time had gone by that it had healed up by the end. It wasn't leading up. But anyway, great match, largely because of the second half and how they fixed it. If they were just going like CZW type stuff, I was not having that whatsoever. But they got it in the right direction and end up on a great match that gave the proper result that everybody wanted. So it worked.
I know you don't grade all the matches like I do. I'm curious what you would give this.
Probably like a 4.25.
Okay.
Mostly, yeah. I if it had been a lot more, 4.25.
I have a feeling because I'm going to rewatch these two matches. I have a feeling I'm going to go up for the Iron Man and maybe hit 5, and come down for this and go 4.25. But
it's so hard to grade an Iron Man match, man. Like it's unlike anything else.
It's very, very different.
I will say, of the Iron Man matches I watched, that was one of my favorites, if not my favorite of all time.
It was not my favorite of all time, but it was one of the top 3 I think I've seen. And that's pretty damn good. Trust me.
Yeah.
Did I imagine this before we move on? When Mox hit the stomp onto the bricks, did the crowd briefly sing Seth Rollins' theme?
I did not hear. I didn't listen for it, so
I could have sworn I heard that. And what I loved was, first of all, it was a nice homage for Mox to do that. But the crowd doing it for a short period of time and then getting right back to the match is a really nice moment. They didn't like hijack the show. They just like acknowledged the fact that, oh, we recognize what's happening here. And then they kind of let it go. So if that did happen, which I'm like 75% sure it did.
I did a quick Twitter search and a couple other people noticed it. So I think you're right.
Okay. So very good job by the crowd. And the crowd was fantastic. San Francisco,
great crowd.
Cow
Great
Palace. Crowd. We didn't say that off the top. We usually comment.
It wasn't the Cow Palace.
I thought it was.
No, it's the Chase Center.
Oh, I thought
Cow Palace is where I think they did Dynamite and Rampage.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I got them mixed up. But fantastic crowd. Really deserve their flowers because they were, I don't want to say they were the MVPs of the show, but they were one of the reasons why the show came across as well as it did. And
they were completely in it for the entire Iron Man match too, which is also because the match was great, but also, crowd helped.
It also started at a good time. This show, It did go long, but it because there were less matches and things were spaced out well, the Iron Man match didn't drain the crowd like you would normally think it would. Also, when there's 7 falls in an Iron Man match, it's a lot easier to stay engaged than if you do 1 or 3.
Yep.
It's way easier that way. All right, let's move to the AEW Women's Championship. Jamie Hayter against Ruby Soho and Saraya in a triple threat match. So Soho came out with a braided mohawk. Britt Baker and Toni Storm were ringside. They immediately went into the crowd, the wrestlers in the match, trying to use that 4K camera or lens or whatever. It just seemed like unnecessary. Back inside, Hayter put Saraya into the apron with a Uranagi and Soho into her knee with another one. Saraya powerbombed Hayter out of the corner on a superplex to Soho. Then she put Ruby in a submission, but Hayter broke it with her huge lariat. Storm distracted on the apron, allowing Saraya to hit Rampage. So Baker distracted on the apron herself, with Soho hitting Destination Unknown for a broken fall. Soho ducked Haterade, which nailed Saraya instead. And then with her, Saraya dead in the corner, Hayter locked Soho's arms into a pinning combination for the sudden win. Storm immediately, and I mean immediately, attacked Baker and Hayter after the bell. Soho got fed up and threw both heels outside. It looked like she was ready to side with the faces, but instead hit Hayter with No Future and Baker with Destination Unknown. Storm threw a cameraman into the barricade and broke his camera. Then Ruby took the spray paint from Saraya and tagged Hayter and Baker with green L's to end the entire thing. Let's start with the match. Totally exceeded my expectations. Damn good stuff from Hayter and Soho, and Saraya did her best work yet, even though it's still kind of just mediocre. Most disappointing was the sudden finish and immediate attack, which told you the match that you just saw was meaningless. And if Soho and the heels were already on the same page, why were they not working together with the title on the line? Unless we're to assume that Ruby didn't decide until it was all over and she lost, despite the fact that she had neon green in her hair the entire time and has been having neon green on her clothes and in her hair for the last couple of weeks. We also got the very trite booking of WWE superstars being the bad outsiders in a result that we could all feel coming in this match. Hayter retaining was the right call, and the wrestling was good. I went 3.5 stars B for this match. The post-match left a lot to be desired from an originality standpoint, though I will say the neutral to face to heel turn in that moment was done well, given that was the planned booking.
Yeah, this was a solid match. First off, I like that Ruby and Jamie Hayter had just different looks for the match. It made the match feel bigger. It felt like they're breaking out like, you know, the big look for the big match. So that helped. Sarai is in such a weird place because she's kind of like the Ronda Rousey of UFC to pro wrestling, where she kind of started the women's revolution, but then one thing happens and she's gone, and she kind of missed everything that follows. So she's just kind of been in that weird spot where I feel like maybe people don't remember everything that she did to get things where they are. Match was good. Match was enjoyable. The end was strange. First, I was like, wait, why is Ruby siding with the person who just beat her? That was like all off the bat, and Jamie Hayter lifts her hand up. I was like, what is going on? She just pinned her. So I was actually relieved to see that Ruby went the other way, because that actually made more sense in the moment. If you think about it for too long, does it make sense? No, not really. But I'm thinking they're going with Ruby just decided in that moment to do it because she was the one who got pinned. And
it seemed like they all knew, though. And her hair was like a giveaway.
I don't know about the hair. I mean, she's wearing all sorts of different colors all the time.
It's the exact same neon green. It's the exact same.
She used to have neon green like for a while. Like I didn't.
But maybe that's why they chose the color in the first place. That's what I'm trying to get at. Like,
I don't know, but I think I'm interested. Like, I don't know. I'm kind of interested in what happens next. Look, we all thought the WWE Outsiders faction thing was going to involve Sasha Banks, Mercedes Moné, and it didn't. So that kind of dampened it for a bit. But I don't know. I'm kind of interested where this goes. Like, something happened. We had a pretty good match. The right person won, and something happened afterward to kind of send it forward. So I liked it.
Well, talking about going forward, my presumption is this booking was done to bring back an AEW original, for lack of a better term, who will then side with the faces for a big moment on Dynamite and a eventual big 6-woman tag team match. They could even go further than that, but it could be Hikaru Shida, given she was involved in this early on. It could also be Thunder Rosa, who seems to be on her way back. And the idea of Rosa, Baker, and Hayter all teaming together is really intriguing, given their history, both in kayfabe and reality. Now, another option is Chris Statlander.
Yep.
I think she's earmarked, for Jade Cargill. And look, they could even go so far to book this all the way out to a blood and guts match, do 5-on-5. There's other, former WWE women in the company. Athena is an option. Ty Mello is there. I think that's probably it, but I can probably think of someone else if I really did. But there's a lot of places they could go with this. I wouldn't be surprised if blood and guts is ultimately the destination.
Yeah, maybe. That'd be interesting. Look, there's something, like, it's not the best story in the world, but there's a story happening, in a women's division, which is a rare for AEW. So I consider that a positive.
Let's move to the Trios Championship match, the Elite defending against House of Black. This started with a bunch of, oh, look at those two wrestlers facing off type of spots. Brody King no-sold a 450 splash, kicking out at 1. Then he crossbodied Kenny Omega into the barricade. Buddy Matthews hit Omega with a great shotgun dropkick that knocked both the Young Bucks off the apron, but they came back with super kicks as Omega countered a cannonball with a V-trigger. Matt Jackson hit sliced bread on Buddy, jumping off Malachi Black's chest. Black and Omega then traded knee strikes in a great sequence. King got knocked out with 2 super kicks and a V-trigger. Omega hit Black with 2 Snapdragons, but Julia Hart distracted on the apron, only for Black to move away after a sequence and Hart to take a V-trigger straight to the kisser from Omega. That distracted Omega just enough for him to eat a Black mass for a broken fall. Omega then ate Dante's Inferno for another broken fall. The Elite super kicked everyone and hit BTE trigger on Black for another broken fall. Buddy then killed Nick with a knee to the face while he sprung off the ropes for an attempted Meltzer driver, with Matt quickly taking Dante's Inferno as House of Black won the Trios titles. This was an exceptional match that we got. The wrestling was top tier. There were plenty of false finishes without overdoing them, and the right trio won with House of Black absolutely needing the titles. Now, the lack of storyline remained a big detractor for this match. It just didn't matter once the bell actually rang. The only real sin here was not letting the title win breathe at all. AEW jumped right into the next match, and this was supposed to be a big moment for House of Black. But Omega took a lot of offense, including 2 finishers, and Buddy's knee to Nick's face was one of my highlights of the show. It was just such a great moment in professional wrestling, and it came in the finish. Oh, by the way, they actually tagged each other the entire match, and that gets an extra thumbs up from the Silver King. 4.5 stars and an A. Damn good match.
I'm at 4.5 as well. When Buddy Matthews hit that knee, I literally yelled out loud, "Oh, fuck."
Yeah.
He absolutely nailed it. To your point about talking about different people facing off one-on-one in the ring, opening with Kenny Omega and Buddy Matthews. And I think it was Excalibur saying that, hey, these two guys have been compared to each other for a long time. And a lot of people called Buddy Matthews a poor man's Kenny Omega with the knee strikes back in the day. I contended at the time, and I think I still kind of believe this, and I think the end of the match showed that Buddy Matthews is better at the knees than Kenny Omega is. I think he always has been, and good he got to shine there. And then you can debate it, whatever. I've always
believed this. I've always believed this. His gear, the fire like at the below his knees, the way it like pops up when he delivers the knee makes it look better.
Sure, yeah, and that's part of it. I mean, you're not really kneeing the guy in the face, so that's a huge part of it for sure. So that was good. I really like the House of Black entrance. I really like Julia Hart's look and all that, so that was real solid. I like the Young Bucks California pants. That I'm pretty sure they've worn those before. Yeah, look, this had no real story going into it, but we agreed, look, if House of Black is ever going to be anything, they have to win this. And they did, and they did it in exciting fashion. I don't know what's next for the Elite. Kenny Omega I'd like Kenny Omega to kind of get back to one-on-ones, kind of remind us who he is as one of the best wrestlers in the world. So yeah, good stuff all around.
Yeah, that was my same thought as well. Omega getting back into the one-on-one picture would make a lot of sense. You could even give him like the All-Atlantic title and have him go overseas and defend it a few times. I'd be interested to see Omega back in that singles division, and the Bucks can do tag team stuff, and that's totally fine as well. Speaking of, let's get to the tag team championship match. The Guns against the Acclaimed, Jay Lethal and Jeff Jarrett, and Orange Cassidy and Danhausen in a fatal 4-way match. Orange came out wearing all black. Max Caster was not on his game whatsoever with his rap, and this had the awful rules where only 2 men are legal at once. The heels did a 4-way strut and scissored each other. Satnam Singh ate an orange punch from Danhausen, and a famouser from Billy Gunn. Then the Guns double low blowed their dad. Acclaimed hit a rival and mic drop for a broken fall. Jarrett missed a guitar shot, and the referee stole the guitar from Caster. That led Caster to eat a Golden Globe to the face and the stroke for a false finish. Jarrett got into a shoving match with the referee. Danhausen ate 310 to Yuma, with the Guns retaining the title. The crowd, no joke, was silent after the bell for a good 3 minutes. Chris, I can only speak to my own personal taste here. And this was not for me in any way. There were some nice sequences.
Really?
Yeah, but there was far, far, far too much comedy. Far, far, far too much interference. And no time where it felt like a change was coming. Plus, this was basically a no DQ match. And the referee stole the guitar from Caster for no reason whatsoever. I went 2.5 stars and a C.
Ooh, nah, this was fun. This was a fun match. First off, again, shout out to Excalibur. Shout out to Excalibur. The Guns came out first. And my thought is, look, I know you want the Acclaim to come out last and do their thing, but I hate when the champion doesn't come out first.
That was the only reason they did it.
And right when I thought that, Excalibur says, now I know that the champions usually come out last, but it's really the champion's prerogative, and they wanted to come out first and set the tone. Boom, right there. Thank you.
I mean, totally they always say that.
I know, but I thought that in the moment Excalibur explained it, I thought he was on top of his game, and this is another example of that. Danhausen, maybe for the first time since he's been in AEW, actually got to do some wrestling and looked pretty decent. I didn't know much about him before AEW. I just have not seen him do much. I thought the Danhausen Satnam Singh face off and the Billy Gunn, famouser on the dude's back was kind of funny. Max Caster did a bit where he pulled down the straps like Kurt Angle, but he didn't have any straps on. I thought that was pretty funny. And there was a Jeff Jarrett false finish in there where I did think for a second that they were going to win. So I disagree that it always felt like the Guns were going to win. There were a couple times I thought Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal might actually win. You're right. Dead silence when the Guns won, which was notable with this crowd. But this was my theory on our Twitter Spaces pre-show. It was for something that was going to come afterward, and that happened.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is what we talked about on the Ultimate Preview as well. So for the first and only time all night, Renee Paquette came out for a post-match interview, which was obviously telling that something was going to happen. The Guns talked shit until FTR's music hit, and they made their return. FTR hit a spike pile driver off the ropes and Shatter Machine, which was called that by Excalibur and not Big Rig. It's interesting because Edge and Beth Phoenix hit Shatter Machine on Finn Balor over at Elimination Chamber, called that. And I was like, oh, that's the Big Rig, but they're calling it the old WWE name. That's cool. And then they're calling it Shatter Machine here in AEW, which is interesting. Anyway,
I think that was just a slip up.
Maybe. Dax also got busted open hard way by his eyebrow, like 30 seconds into this. It wasn't a blade. It was just, it happened. They grabbed the titles and they just kind of dropped them and the whole thing ended. Now, it would have been nice if this return was not so telegraphed. There was zero reason for Renee to come out to the ring. Just, there was none. The Guns could have cut a promo. They could have been beating someone down. Million different things you can do. Or FTR simply could have rushed them after the bell. I can't imagine that they're going to be pushing this like 3 months to the next pay-per-view. So I presume FTR will win the titles on an upcoming Dynamite special or something like that. It was all fine. It didn't get me particularly excited. Initially, we thought FTR might be in the match as a replacement, or they might have been in one of those battle royals and won and been in the match. They weren't. They let the match go on, and they decided to, re-debut them or return them, I should say, after the fact. That's okay. It was decent. They got a nice pop. It didn't really do anything for me.
I liked it. I like seeing them back for one, and this completely changes the dynamic of the AEW tag team picture because we said coming in like, why are these 4 teams in the tag team match? What the heck happened to the greatest tag team division of all time? Well, it's starting to maybe get sorted out again. The Elite lost the Trios title, so they're free. FTR is back, so like things are changing.
We're going to go back to the Usos New Day equivalent in AEW, the continuous Young Bucks and FTR.
We're doing FTR Guns, and they had a previous story from a while back. So that all totally makes sense. I think this is going to kind of reset the division moving forward, and it'll be, you'll get less of Orange Cassidy and Danhausen, in a championship match, so to speak. So I think that's all positive. And yeah, interview was random and telegraphed, but that always happens in wrestling. Sometimes they do interviews after. Sometimes there was a WWE match a couple pay-per-views ago where they did an interview afterward for no reason whatsoever. It's just it happens, and I'm fine with it being telegraphed.
That didn't happen
because, we said, I don't remember who it was, but I just remember it happened.
It didn't.
But I was also fine with it being telegraphed and everything because, like we said, the crowd was dead silent. You could not just end it with the Guns winning and that being the end.
That's even more reason they can just beat them up, or they can just cut a promo themselves with the mic and have it be natural. When you have all these matches and Renee doesn't do shit, and after this match she comes out to interview the Guns of all people, it's like, oh, okay, here's FTR. Like for me, it totally telegraphed and ruined the surprise element.
But it was never going to be that big of a surprise, I don't think. They weren't.
I think 2 stomps and then music hits is a surprise. I mean,
I'm the big surprise guy.
You're really defending this tag team match
and
post-match. You really are.
The match was fun. I just thought the match was fun. The post-match, yes, was completely telegraphed, but considering it was the Guns, I'm fine with it. Yes, it could have been better. Yes, if they had done what you said. That's
all I'm saying is it would have been better.
I don't think it was bad necessarily either.
I think it was telegraphed. Saying it's telegraphed doesn't saying it was bad or
You're
terrible.
just shitting on everything that had to do with this match, and I think
this is the match. Let me fucking reset the table.
I think it's leading into how you feel about that table here.
The match sucked. Okay, the match was a 2.5 star C. It was garbage. I'd never want to even think about the match again. The post-match was totally fine. I was explaining how it could have been better and more realistic. That's it.
You were just hating on it the whole time because I think you hated because
saying that it was telegraphed is a descriptor. It's not me saying it was terrible.
I agree it was telegraphed. Anyway,
okay, that's it. That's all that has to be said.
Watch go watch the match again. It was fun.
We're moving on. Ricky Starks fought Chris Jericho with JAS barred from ringside. On Rampage, Starks attacked Jericho on commentary, with the show ending in a pull-apart brawl. Now, this match opened the main card on Revolution. Starks dominated early. Jericho came back with his signatures. Starks countered a codebreaker into like a sort of power bomb, but Jericho countered the spear with a codebreaker. Then Starks hit a spear off the ropes for a near fall, and later countered Walls of Jericho into a single leg crab. Sammy Guevara then ran down, only to get speared by Action Andretti as a distraction for Jericho to get the bat and nail Starks into the gut, but Starks blocked Judas Effect, landed forearms, and then pulled Jericho into Rochambeau for the win. Now, quick, since it factored into the finish, what good is a ringside ban if someone can still just run down to the ring? That's like a DQ in a Hell in a Cell match. Okay, It's nowhere near as bad as a DQ in a Hell in a Cell match, but it is still stupid. We have to be honest about that. Aside from that, this was a really solid opener, the nice babyface pop to begin the show. I didn't find it to be spectacular wrestling by any means, but we've seen Jericho have better matches recently, and I thought this would be akin to those. We got the right winner, a necessary winner in Starks, and maybe now we'll finally even get a break from Jericho. Plus, the block of the Judas Effect was a really cool way to start the finishing sequence. I went 3.5 stars and a B.
Yeah, this was solid. A nice, solid opener. Nothing too crazy. And again, wasn't overbooked. It would have been real easy to do something really stupid at the end of this match. Yes, I agree. Running down to the ring when you're banned from ringside should maybe be a DQ, but at least he didn't like hang out there. At least he was intercepted, essentially. We talked about on the Twitter Spaces pre-show, we were worried about something else happening with Chris Jericho and maybe a new member of JAS interfering or something like that. That didn't happen. And ultimately, Ricky Starks just straight up got 2 wins over Chris Jericho, and he looks great. And he actually said in the post-match, post-show press conference, that's his first pay-per-view win of all time. So shout out to Ricky Starks, who, again, among many people, can get back into the title picture. I guess Ricky Starks has name dropped Kenny Omega a couple times in the presser, so maybe something happens there. But, real solid in a situation where Jericho often wins these matches that he probably shouldn't. He didn't. So, again, another AEW pillar type of guy winning it over a former WWE wrestler.
And I think Excalibur also mentioned, since we're giving him so much credit on this show, Jericho has now lost 4 or 5 matches consecutively. I think this was 4. So clearly they're doing a losing streak storyline with him. And I could definitely see that leading to perhaps JS breaking up and maybe Jericho even turning babyface, which would be a nice, refreshing tilt on the entire thing. So we'll see what happens. I do believe that Fozzy has a concert series coming up, so Jericho should be away for a little bit. When he comes back, hopefully everything's refreshed, and I would love if the JAS was dead.
Also, Chris Jericho is 0-4 at Revolution, apparently.
Very interesting. Okay. Jack Perry, Jungle Boy, fought Christian Cage in a final burial match. Now, this was changed from No Holds Barred. You may say, hey, Silver King, how did that get changed when they just announced the match Wednesday on Dynamite? Well, I'll tell you. On Rampage, Jungle Boy in a taped promo said a fight isn't enough to end their feud. Quote, since you're a big fan of my dad, I'm going to give you a chance to say hi to him when I put you in the ground. So this was changed to a final burial match 48 hours before the show. And Chris, I get the reasoning provided. I do. It just kind of felt, from a stipulation standpoint, unnecessary and kind of ill-fitting, at least to me.
Yes, in the moment, I would have been fine with it if, we had set this up a week ago, or something like that. If you weren't paying attention, if you missed Rampage, you would have been completely confused why they did this. And I understood it because, they mentioned Luke Perry multiple times, and I said that on our Ultimate Preview. Just, plan that out more ahead of time, and you can probably lean into it a little bit more if that was the purpose, and really set up Final Burial and explain what the rules are so we know before the match starts.
Exactly.
We didn't quite know what the rules were.
Okay, so the gimmick wound up being, and we thought it was going to be a buried alive match. It wound up being a casket match with a casket elevated in a grave type area beyond the stage. So Christian wore a black turtleneck muscle shirt, which straight up, dude, I didn't even know that existed as an item of clothing that you could buy. And Jack was in jeans and boots. So this dragged early until Christian stepped on Perry's hair and pulled him upwards by his like head in a really cool spot. Or maybe it was by his arms. I think it was by his arms. Then he took a violent bump into the barricade, eating a tope suicida. At some point, he got busted open on his brow. Then he whipped Jungle Boy with his belt up the ramp until opening the casket and revealing 2 steel chairs. Jack hit a cannonball off the stage and then went for a chair shot, with Christian low blowing him and throwing dirt into his eyes. He hit kill switch on the dirt, but Jungle Boy avoided a concerto and locked in snare trap, putting the handle of a shovel in Christian's mouth. Jack then pulled the trigger with a concerto, dragging Christian into the casket, kissing him on the forehead, and closing the lid. And then the casket just kind of fell into the abyss with a puff of dust or smoke kind of popping out afterward. Now, the booking here was spot on. And that is, in the case of this match, more important than the work rate and the match quality. They played into the concerto spot from TV, though when Jack delivered it, he actually hit him on the head, which was really unfortunate. But this gave Perry a cathartic signature win over a veteran. And even though the first half was kind of whatever, the brawl up by the casket at the end was really solid. The finish was well done with all of the finishing moves, the dirt in the face, the shovel. I still found the stipulation unnecessary. And I literally and legitimately laughed out loud when the coffin dropped into the grave. It was very cartoonish to me. Everything was executed really well. I'm still going to go 3.5 stars and a B, but if they tweaked a couple of those items, it would have come across a little bit better.
I think I'd go about 4 stars. I thought the coffin dropping into the dirt was actually really cool because I didn't know it was coming. So I was like, whoa, like that was just kind of surprising and added to it. I think it was a weird stipulation. I think they could have clarified that a bit better, but I liked it. Sleeveless turtleneck is some elite healing work. However, that thing does not breathe very well because everything up around your neck is tight. So
why would you wear a turtleneck in a wrestling match? Can you like?
He seemed to be sweating extra around his face.
Unless he had like a brace on or something. Like, I mean, holy shit, that was so weird.
On the flip side, what do I say about Drew McIntyre in jeans and shirtless? Like, same thing with Jungle Boy. Like, that look. He is no longer Jungle Boy. He is Jungle Man when he is wearing the shirtless, no wrist tape or anything with the jeans.
She's got me saying, "Hey now!"
He looked huge, dude. Am I wrong that like he looked like he's beefed up a bit?
He's a cut dude, and you know what? Credit to MJF too. He took off that robe, and I heard some reactions out there. Both those guys really putting the work in the gym for sure.
Yeah, I mean, but you think back to Jungle Boy with the trunks and the wrist tape, and he looks so skinny. I don't know if it was just the jeans doing it, but he looked bigger. So credit to him, he looked great. And yeah, the concerto. Oof. Hope Christian is okay because he really took that one in the side of the head. And lastly, Jungle Boy. He delivers in big matches. Like he can kind of get lost in the picture week to week on TV, but I thought this was one of the best matches of the night. This match ended and I was like, man, how are the Elite and House of Black going to follow that?
You thought this was one of the best matches of the night?
They ultimately did.
Best this what number?
Top. Let me see the whole card here. I put
if
this
you say top 4, I can buy it. Any more than
behind the Iron Man match. I probably put it 3rd behind the 6-man and the Iron Man.
Ahead of the death match.
Yes, I think I may have given it a higher grade or whatever, but
yeah,
maybe because the expectations were low going into this, but I thought this was real. And you go back to the last pay-per-view, Jungle Boy's had some really, really good pay-per-view matches.
Yeah.
He delivers kind of on the big stage. And again, a AEW pillar going over a former WWE wrestler.
I did miss one item here that I did mean to mention and I forgot. When Jungle Boy was standing over the casket, there was a long delay before he closed the lid. And I was kind of like, at first when I was like watching, I was like, close the fucking lid. Like the match is over or whatever.
I was waiting too. Yeah.
But then I realized, and this was a really good piece of storytelling, that it eclipsed me until I was kind of going over it again, like waiting for the next match to start. He was, to some degree, bearing another father. And he already had to do it once, and how painful that was. He had to do it a second time. He kissed him on the forehead. He closed the lid. So it was almost like doing it again, this time to a mentor as opposed to a biological father. Really nice touch. And again, the storytelling in this feud, it was always sensible. Like it always just made sense what they were doing and the levels they were going to and all that type of stuff. But it dragged on really, really long. And then Christian got hurt and they did the whole stuff with Luchasaurus and then Christian went away. Then he came back and they kind of said, you know what? Let's just kind of restart this and get this out of the way in 2 weeks. And they succeeded. So I got to give them credit for that. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens with Christian from here. It has been 3 years since he signed with AEW. Now, he could have injury time added on. If he doesn't, it's possible that his contract has expired or will be expiring. And if Edge is working one final year in WWE, they could potentially do tag team stuff together and like dual swan songs, dual retirements. Or he could take a bunch of time off TV and return to AEW, or he could just straight up retire. So I am curious to see what happens with Christian here. Not the biggest fan of his, but this was a really solid way to put over Jungle Boy. And it's fair to say that he still has some wrestling left in him.
Do we know, was Christian ever cleared by WWE? I know he came back and did one segment during the Thunderdome era.
Yeah, he did the punt
kick. I don't know that he was the punt kick. But did they show the punt kick or did they like camera show it?
No, they showed it, but it was taped and angles and stuff.
Yeah,
that was different than being cleared to do a whole match. I don't believe he was cleared for that, but I mean, they'll clear him. I mean,
that's part of it. And also just good for Christian to come back. After he wanted to keep wrestling, WWE wouldn't clear him. And he has since been the Impact World Champion. He beat Kenny Omega, puts on a great match to help get Jungle Boy over. Like he's had a really, really solid run in the past few years. And I know, Edge is Edge. I know there's kind of a Twitter theory view that Christian is secretly actually better than Edge. I wouldn't put it that far, but
that is total horseshit.
He is very, very solid in his own right. And these last couple of weeks were a reminder of how good he can be.
All right, a couple more matches before we move on to the grades and wrap this whole show up. The TNT Championship, Samoa Joe against Wardlow. Powerhouse Hobbs was shown in a suite throughout the match. He, of course, holds the brass ring and will get the next TNT title match against the winner coming out of this. Wardlow hit a double jump moonsault early. Joe caught him out of the corner with a Uranagi. Wardlow came back with an F10 and a Swanton bomb for a near fall. Joe locked him in the coquina clutch, but Wardlow survived and later powerbombed Joe off the middle rope. But Joe almost immediately recovered. He taunted Wardlow with the symphony, so Wardlow put Joe into the rear naked choke with Joe's arm falling 3 times for the knockout win. So we said we'd come back to this in the show. They didn't just do the quick tap and see him knock out, and he did not tap. He did not submit. They did the arm falling 3 times, so they were consistent about it on this show, and that is very good. So we definitely got some degree of what we wanted to see here.
Big meaty man slapping meat. That's what I want.
But I gotta say, I felt the match was largely unspectacular. Like Wardlow submitting Joe didn't sit right with me. Like this is a submission master in Joe. And given they were doing 2 more where Mox and Brian were submitting, just seemed like a lot. And Wardlow's not really a submission specialist. The finish kind of came suddenly. And the match itself never really left first gear. But that's okay. Not every match is going to be a work rate classic. No idea how they're going to book this with Hobbs getting the title match on Dynamite because he really should win that. But at the same time, Wardlow absolutely should not lose. This was solid. I went 3 stars and a B-.
Yeah, this was right after this came right after the Texas death match, I think, right? Yeah. So it was, it was a cool down. Like there's no doubt about it at that point, which is tough for them. I thought the match was fine. It was good. You did some big man spots. You got some power bombs. You did some stuff that you just didn't see anywhere else on the card. And the AEW needs stuff like that. You need to have different types of things. Choking out Samoa Joe, I was like, whoa, like that's interesting. Both because Wardlow won and to win like that kind of makes me change my mind on what I think is going to happen on Dynamite. I don't think you can have Wardlow lose the title.
Oh, no, you can't. No, you can't.
4 days after doing this, which is notable.
The only way you can have Wardlow lose is if like Samoa Joe tries to get even and cost him, or something like that happens. But
yeah, right. and Wardlow mentioned in the post show press conference that he failed to cash in the ring a year ago. And it said in character that Hobbs would too, so it's not unprecedented. But again, coming right after the Texas Death Match, it's the second match in a row to end via choking somebody.
Mm-hmm.
So it just doesn't land as well. We just saw a guy choked out with a chain, Jabba the Hutt style, over the ring. Choking a guy in a headlock just doesn't hit the same right after that. So that's just the way things were booked and placed on the card. It didn't maybe land as well as it did. But look, good for Wardlow. I think this is probably a bit of a run for him. He says he wants to do a TNT Open Challenge. Obviously, he's got Powerhouse Hobbs next, so we will see.
Let's just hope this TNT title run for him is better than the last one. That's all I can really say.
Yep.
We had Mark Briscoe and the Lucha Brothers against Ari Daivari and the Varsity Athletes on 0 Hour, which was the kickoff show. Ray Phoenix badly missed a Hurricane out of the corner, which is the most rare thing to say Phoenix missed anything. 5 guys combined for a super duperplex out of the corner, with Tony Nese hitting a 450 immediately after for a near fall. There was a great false finish here where it looked like the baby faces might lose, but the Lucha Bros combined for a cool Fear Factor double move before Briscoe hit the flying elbow drop for the win. Pentagon also did a package pile driver on Mark Sterling after the bell for an extra pop. 3 stars, B-. Solid. No problems here.
Yeah, it was fine. So, like you said, some good false finishes where I thought, Lucha Brothers and Briscoe might actually lose. So credit to them for that. It was fine.
And on that note, before we get to the grades, which we're going to do almost immediately, I just wanted to briefly talk about the formatting of 0 Hour with Renee Paquette and RJ City interviewing people both in the arena and backstage. This felt so much more natural and energetic than what AEW has done in the past. And it is far better than the simple panel discussion on the WWE kickoff shows, airing a lot of the video packages that you're going to see on the show anyway. Now, that said, and everyone has their own taste, so this is not an insult, the RJ guy was immensely annoying to me. Someone that I never want to listen to talk or do something on a kickoff show ever again. Not entertaining at all. But the format of this, I thought, was a huge improvement.
Yes, I found it entertaining, and it made everything feel bigger. They kept going to live shots, with Renee in the arena, and the crowd could hear her there. To me, that was just much more engaging and interesting, something to have on in the background, as opposed to having 3 or 4 more matches in the card turning into a 15-match card. So I really liked it. I saw some people online saying it was very WWE of them, and I was like, I don't know what WWE you're watching. Like you said,
I don't know what that means.
We just get a panel there, in whatever. I thought this was interesting. I knew of RJ City. I'd never really seen him before, though. A little over the top in some spots, but also generally seemed to really enjoy it. I know he does the Hey EW show, so this is a guy who's really into it. I thought it was entertaining and interesting and more natural than a lot of the pre-show stuff we get before. So I liked it. I hope they keep doing it.
All right. Well, Chris, let's move to the final portion of this instant analysis podcast. And that is our grades for the 2023 AEW Revolution. Now, before we get to the post-show grades, let's go over what our pre-show expectation grades were. On our ultimate preview, my expectation grade was a B+. Yours was an A-, and the Getting Overheads weighed in on Twitter before Revolution. 11.4% said A, 59.5% said B, 20.3% said C, and 8.9% said D to F. And I don't know how your expectation grade for a show can be D to F, but that is not a small number. So we had to count it. Whereas in other situations, when it's 1%, it doesn't, it's all people just trolling. That averaged out shockingly, Chris, to a 3.24, which is not just a B, that's a low B. So the expectations going into AEW Revolution from the listeners, I think for the first time in the history of the show, fell below what both your and my grades were on the Ultimate Preview.
That might be the lowest we've ever had for any show, almost, I think, unless I'd have to think back to the early days. But
I'm almost positive there have been some WWE pay-per-views that were B expectations. There might have been,
especially in the Thunderdome era too. There was probably
but 3.24 it's been a long time on average. That's
very look. The build was not good.
It wasn't.
That said, I was looking forward to this card. That's why I gave it an A-.
Now let's, with that, Chris, go to the post-show grades. As always, when we do the grades, I start with you. So, Chris, what was your final grade for AEW Revolution?
I am right on the line between A and A-. I thought this was a great show. I thought top to bottom, this was AEW's best show that they've done. It was not overbooked.
Best, wait, hold on. 30-second timeout. Best, meaning number one pay-per-view ever.
Yes. Not Forbidden Door is kind of different. I'm not counting Forbidden
AEW
Door,
only. Number one
AEW only. I think this was my favorite top to bottom show because it never felt like, oh my God, we've still got 9 matches to go after this. We didn't start off the show with 2 25-minute matches. Like we get through 2 matches and it was like 7:40 here. And I was like, oh man, we're like making pretty good time. And like, so I never like dreaded what was coming. Everything on the show was pretty good to great. We got an all-time main event match, I think. So I thought everybody looked good. Like I thought this was a really good, maybe this was the best show that AEW has done on a pay-per-view. And for that, I think I'm going to go with an A at like a 94 out of 100, a low A. I was a low A- coming in. I was like a 90 out of 100. I'm thinking 94 low A here.
Okay, so it still exceeded your expectations to a significant degree, but
yes,
right on the border though, not a high A, a low A. Okay.
Yes.
So let me go ahead and I'll give my grade next, and then we'll go to the Getting Over Heads, our listeners and our followers on Twitter at Getting Overcast. For the Silver King, it definitely exceeded my expectations. Let's get that straight. I was at a B+. I thought that was a completely fair expectation grade coming into the show. But you're right in that the main event was spectacular. It was an A+. There were 2 A matches, no matter what level of A you wanted to put them on, the Texas Death Match and the Trios match. And there was a lot of other really entertaining stuff. I think what some are confusing is a great show with a show that doesn't make you angry, frustrated, and tired. Because this show did not make me angry. It did not make me frustrated. And I'm not tired coming in to do this instant analysis like we have been so many other AEW shows. And that's because of putting the wrong people over, convoluted match finishes, all that type of stuff. That went away. So, Chris, I disagree that it was the best AEW pay-per-view. I do believe it was the most consistent from top to bottom. There was never a valley where I said, and this is coming from someone who hated the tag team title match. Even that, though, I understood, hey, it was fun. The crowd liked it. Like, it wasn't my taste, but other people liked it. So it didn't have that valley where you said, oh, like, this is the popcorn match or this is the piece of shit booking. We knew it was coming. That didn't happen. At the same time, even though I loved the Iron Man match, and I liked very much a lot of the other matches on the card, it didn't have the peaks that some of AEW's best pay-per-views have had previously. So I do believe it was the most consistent, but it was not the best. Unlike you went with a low A. I'm going to go with a flat A-, which is still a very, very good grade. And again,
yes, it is.
It exceeded my expectations coming into the show.
Yeah, no, all those points are fair. I agree that the peaks were maybe not as high as some other ones. This wasn't Adam Cole and Daniel Bryan debuting and stuff like that. And I think we're so conditioned to expect and wait for some big debut to happen at every single AEW pay-per-view that the fact that it didn't, and we got the FTR return, which was telegraphed, like, was fine. But, we got a new TNT champion. We got new trios champions. We got Jungle Boy establishing himself in a unique match. We got a main event match that will go up as one of the best Iron Man matches of all time. I just thought top to bottom, this was unlike any AEW show we've ever had. And I think probably because they had a 60-minute match, they had to do it differently. But they only gave us one match on the pre-show. They could have given us 3 or 4 like they've done in the past.
That was also a thrown together match on the pre-show. Chris, the truth is,
I'm saying AEW approached this show differently than they ever have before, and I think it paid off huge.
They did, and I agree with that. The proof will be in the pudding, though. If they learn that lesson for their next pay-per-view, Double or Nothing, and going forward, if they realize, even if you don't have a 60-minute Iron Man match, you can still book a pay-per-view just like this. You can add one more match than they had here and do the exact same show with like 10 matches flat. You don't go crazy 13, 14, 15, or whatever number, some of that craziness that we had previously. You do 9 or 10 matches, you give everything time to breathe, and you have consistent, sensible booking, where even if it's not a result that the fans like, it's one that they can accept. And I think that is what we got from Revolution. That's why I gave it an A-. You gave it an A. You liked some of it more even than I did. Now,
yes.
As far as our listeners, the Getting Overheads on Twitter, and those that listen to this show, let's get to their final grades. And these really reflect the show exceeding expectations. A reminder, okay? Our listeners are at 3.24 as an average, which isn't just a B, it's a low B on the grading scale. And they were 11% A, 60% B. Here in the final grade, 50.8% A, 35.8% B, 8.3% C, and 5% D. That averages out to 3.89 and a solid B plus from the listeners. So you may say, well, hey, Silver King, Chris, Vintage, they're not where you guys were, the A or A minus. That's okay. They recognize the show was way better than they expected it. And that is a significant jump, going from a 3.24 to a 3.89. So I think everyone believes that Revolution exceeded expectations, that it delivered a really high quality show. Some liked it more than others. That's bound to happen. But for me, A-, I sit right between you and the listeners.
I think one of the best things I could say in AEW's favor about booking this pay-per-view is that there was nothing on the show where I said, why is this happening? Why are we doing this? And actually, Tony Khan said in the post press conference that people weren't featured on the show like maybe he would have wanted, because they had one match taking up an hour, and people like Jade Cargill, and he needs to make it up to them or something like that. Jade Cargill does not need to have a pay-per-view match on this show. No. Like we said, she's a TV champion, so she doesn't need to. That, like, we didn't have that, like, oh my God, why is this a match? Bad wrestling, bad story. We don't need this here. Like, do an hour-long match made them cut out the fat, so to speak, of what they normally do. Instead of trying to fit everybody on this massive roster onto the card, they were forced to basically stick with things that matter and have a bit of a story. And I think that paid off huge. And that is a lesson that I hope they pick up, that I know you only do 4 of these a year. You don't need to have everybody on these.
You don't. And that's why I'm saying the proof is really going to be going forward and seeing if they learn that lesson. They realize why this was so well received, or they just think, oh, well, the wrestling was good and people liked the way we booked it. So, we'll just go back to what we were doing previously and think about booking, similar match finishes or something like that. Hopefully they learn the lesson that in some cases, less is more, and letting things breathe and not shoving everyone onto a single show is the key. On the way out, Chris, really quick, okay? Let's just give a quick thought, okay? 2 things happened on Sunday night that might be hinting at a certain someone returning to AEW. Number one, I mentioned it in the main event, MJF screaming into the camera, I'm the best in the world, best in the world. He said it like 3 times. Obviously, we know that's a tagline, not of Shane McMahon, although it was for a period of time, but of CM Punk.
I forgot about that.
And FTR, when they returned, they came out in very bright, colorful shirts. And if you look at the AEW shop Twitter or just the AEW shop, it is called FTR Live in Color. And you may say, well, what does that have to do with CM Punk? Well, Live in Color is very similar to Living Color, which is the artist behind Cult of Personality, CM Punk's entrance theme, and a very popular song, of course, from back in the day. So, Chris, I got to tell you, I really didn't think the CM Punk thing was going to happen. Kind of feels like it's going to happen. I don't know. Maybe I'm throwing a couple things together that are just innocuous, but I mean, this is a conversation I have at a later time when we have more time. But first blush, kind of seems like it's happening.
I think there have been a lot of tea leaves over the past few weeks to indicate that everybody's in a much better spot now. And frankly, I hope CM Punk comes back. He's entertaining. I like when he's on TV. That doesn't mean I think he's a great person. That doesn't mean I agree with things that he said and did. Absolutely not. But this is wrestling. And everybody comes back at some point usually. And if Punk comes back, I think you have to start him off.
You say Hangman. Usually, I don't mean to interrupt you, but you say usually. This guy did something that had never been done before. Absolutely trashed his company, his executive vice presidents, and to some degree embarrassed his owner. Not to some degree, to a large degree. Publicly, immediately after winning the championship.
No, I agree. It was terrible. It was horrible. He needed to be suspended just for what he said at the press conference alone, completely. But if he comes back, I think you have to put him with Hangman, and you have to lean into what happened, because that's where the money is.
Oh my God.
And you have to let Hangman go over. Like that is how you make good. That's how you make money, and that's how you make good, and that's how you get CM Punk to prove that he's a team player, and he's going to do that stuff. So
I forgot the third reference, by the way. Sorry. MJF in the scrum is eating donuts. Sorry, not eating donuts. He's eating pickles. Like CM Punk ate whatever he ate. Was it muffins or something?
Some sort of muffin.
In a very similar fashion, with a towel around his neck, with blood on his face. So 3 references pretty much in a single night.
Ricky Starks also came out and said, so what do you guys want to talk about?
Oh, he did, like Cody? That's fine.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, look, I think it's probably more likely than not at this point that Punk comes back, just because there's been so much about it. But like I said, I think if he comes back, you got to make him a heel, and he's got to eat some crow. And I think there's a lot of potential if everybody can play ball. That's a huge if.
I believe I said this on our pre-show, was it? But there's a difference between being, 24, 25 years old, like Randy Orton, and then 10, 12, 15 years later, maturing and figuring out that, the way you acted and things you did were immature, and you need to be smarter and more professional and things like that. It's another thing when you're, 44 and you turn 45 and someone's expecting you to change. This guy's a known quantity. I'll save a rant for if and when he ultimately returns, but there will be one. I guarantee that if he does return to AEW. Not to end the show on that note, just thought it was worth talking about given everything that transpired on Sunday night. Chris, that is this edition of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. Is there anything else that you want to share before we get out of here?
I don't. Let me pull up my notes. Was there anything else? Adam Cole. They talked to him on the pre-show.
Mm-hmm.
We talked to RJ City, reiterated he's coming back at the end of the month. We'll see, but Adam Cole as a face doesn't quite do it for me. So we'll see. If he gets involved with MJF or not, but they've used him as like a face of the company type guy in recent years to talk about, he introduced Forbidden Door. I think he talks about All Access. He's going to be featured. Britt Baker is going to be featured as well. They're moving him into kind of almost like the Cody role, essentially. It seems like, but him as a face, it's not quite the same for me, even though everybody loves his cheers and everything. So we will see, but more than anything, looking forward to him getting back, I guess, by the end of the month.
I respect that take from you, but I'm going to tell you right now, Adam Cole is going to be massively over as a babyface and you will change your tune about that.
He will be. I completely agree. He will be over. I just think his promos aren't as good as a face.
They're better as a heel. That's fair.
Yeah,
that's fair to say. All right, Chris, let's wrap up this show with a reminder of what's coming this week on the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. We will be back Tuesday with our next WWE episode as the road to WrestleMania 39 continues. On Thursday, we will have our next AEW and NXT episode. And just a little teaser for all of you out there, the Silver King will be interviewing a WWE Hall of Famer this coming week in a conversation that will be aired on the Getting Over Wrestling podcast next week. So stay tuned for that. On the way out, allow me to provide you with one more reminder that this podcast
is all about Defy.
So head on over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Drop those 5-star ratings on Apple. Leave a 5-star written review. Let everyone know how much you love the show. Tell them why you listen and why they should subscribe. And perhaps mention how much you love the Ultimate Previews and Instant Analysis podcast. Also, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Getting Overcast. That's how you get to vote in our polls. You also get episode drops, news, analysis highlights, and so much more. Chris, thank you for joining me. Getting Overheads, thank you all for listening. It is now time for the Silver King to sign off and leave you with just 3 final words. Bye for now.